From Glen to Glen, as that song says in the lyrics. Hello and welcome to this sacred space, the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Montclair, for our celebration of life service for a very special man, Michael Lawrence McCann, known to most people as Mike. I'm Reverend Scott Samler Michael, senior co-minister here at UUCM, serving with my wife and co-minister, Reverend Anya. We are joined by Tom Parenti on piano, our lead technician, Deborah Ann Tripoldi, up in the booth, and a menagerie of musical McCann's. It's been a delight to get to know you all and to work with you all. The Unitarian Universalist way of celebrating a life has little to do with doctrine, but everything to do with remembering what we can about our lost loved ones so he can remain more completely in our hearts and minds. Indeed, we gather in ritual whenever a dear one has died, as people have done since the dawn of time. Our guides are our conscience, our sense of decorum, our love of life, and our acknowledgement that some great mystery pervades our existence to which we must bear witness. To that end, we ask you to get comfortable in your seats, to turn off your electronic devices as we enter into the spirit of worship and remembrance. Please locate the chalice lighting words in your order of service as we light the chalice, the sacred symbol of our faith. Let us open our senses to take in the beauty. Let us open our hearts to learn what is true. And let us open our hearts to love one another.
I invite you to rest now for a moment in a spirit of prayer or meditation or reflection as you are called. May we tend to the feelings that are moving through us and through this space. We begin with gratitude for the life of Michael McCann. And we add grief for our loss, and sadness for the pain that accompanies life, and hope that we will find in these proceedings something to hold on to, something to carry forward. May the spirit of life that moves with us through all of our seasons, through youth, through maturity, and through the tender times of old age, may that grace us now with peace. May we know that death is a part of life. It is the finality that gives our restless days meaning. It is the rest that bookends our being. And may we know that love will never let us go. Love remains always as a lasting legacy in the hearts and the minds, in the community that remains. May we know this love as the final gift of life, the lasting testimony of a life that is well lived. May we find peace in that love. May Michael McCann, father, doctor, brother, friend, family member, congregant, may Michael McCann know peace in the rest that attends him. Amen. I welcome you to find your gray hymnal and turn to number 123. This is Spirit of Life. We welcome you to rise as you are able as we blend our voices in song.
I'd like to invite Nathaniel Voss to come forward. Nathaniel will share a reading by the Indian mystic Rabindranath Tagore, and this piece is titled, My Last Song.
Let all the strains of joy mingle in my last song, the joy that makes the earth flow over in the righteous excess of the grass, the joy that sets the twin brothers, life and death, dancing over the wide world, the joy that sweeps in with the tempest, shaking and waking all life together with laughter, the joy that sits still with its tears on the open red lotus of pain, and the joy that throws everything it has on the dust and knows not a word.
Shamrocks
You know, it's really a good thing that I don't mind tough acts to follow. Darren and Ann and all y'all. Goodness gracious, we should have charged tickets to this. We could have raised some money. Oh my. Michael Lawrence McCann, Mike. He was described as a force of nature, a man of many names. Mike, Dad, Uncle, Grandpa, Grandpa, no Mike, which nobody explained to me why that. Brother, Godfather, Doc. I'm sure I'm missing a dozen or so. Mike was just shy of his 89th year when he passed. An innovator, a rebel, a generous, curious spirit. His, at least from all I heard, was a life well lived. The second child of Richard McCann and Rose Tony, Michael grew up in a close-knit family with 5 siblings: Rick, Fran, David, Ann, and Bill. He spent his early years shuttling between Cleveland, Atlanta, and Fort Worth as the family followed the work of his father, who worked as a photo engraver. And during the summers, he and his brothers traveled by train to the farms of their Uncle Ralph and Aunt Martha in Barneveld, Wisconsin. I heard lots of stories about these times on the farm, which I know my wife and co-minister would approve of, as she's very fond of gardening and farming. Mike often said that those were the happiest years of his life. Mike got a scholarship to attend Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, where he studied pre-med and was on the wrestling team. I'm told he earned the nickname Pinner McCann. That sounds like a tough guy name if I ever heard one. He pursued a medical degree at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, and it is there where he met his partner and the woman whom I'm told really kept him from going too far off the rails, Sally Ann Finney, where she was attending the nursing program. Mike graduated medical school in 1958, just after his first child, Linda, was born, and the new family moved to Cleveland, Ohio, to complete his residency. Soon thereafter, his other children, Lori, Joe, and Steve, were born. After a spell in Columbia, Missouri, Michael took a faculty position with the medical school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, only a half-hour drive from his beloved Barneveld farm. In 1970, he started a private pediatric practice, making himself available to his patients night and day, including making house calls. Remember those? Some of us may, some of us, I'm sure, wonder what that word means. Michael was involved in his local community as a Cub Scout leader, Little League baseball coach, team doctor for football and for hockey teams. And all that moving around during his childhood seemed to fashion a wanderlust in him. He wasn't one to stay in any single place for long. Wisconsin, Florida, Ohio, New Jersey, and beyond. Mike was known to stand up for causes that he believed in, that he championed, and he would research them so he could make sure he schooled you on the proper point of view. In Cincinnati, 1955, he engaged in lunch counter advocacy to force the integration of public spaces. Like many in that era, Mike was also concerned about uncontrolled human population growth. I was 8 in 1970, and I remember this was everywhere at that time. We don't hear about it so much anymore, except maybe in respect to climate change and such, but he was really concerned about population growth. And because of that concern for population growth, and because of his medical training, He was a champion of a woman's right to choose and was a very big supporter of Planned Parenthood. Indeed, I'm told Mike was once fired because of his open support for women's reproductive health care. He's a man who laid it all on the line for his values. Mike was also a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists. That's the group that was dedicated to warning us about the horrors of nuclear arms proliferation. And as you might understand, Mike was also dedicated to combating climate change and encouraging others to do the same. Professionally, I'm told Mike often took the most difficult medical cases, even coming up with some innovative treatments for diseases, which branded him among his colleagues as a bit, well, unorthodox. I'm told this included using unconventional methods, like when he used E. coli bacteria to treat severe intestinal ailments such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and more. But doctors today are beginning to use some of the treatments that he pioneered. Mike McCann was a seeker, a doer, a jokester, a risk taker. After his beloved wife Sally passed in 2008, Mike became a snowbird, living with his daughter Lori and her family here in Montclair, New Jersey. And this is when he became a member here, and when we got to know him after we started here in 2017. I'm told Mike was most at home in the garden planting flowers. No matter how many flowers one had, he said there was always room for one more. And some of his favorites included the mandevilla and orchids. Mike loved to send flowers and books he enjoyed to everyone he knew for special occasions or for no reason at all, other than to let them know that he was thinking of them. Or maybe he thought maybe you had to read that book. I think there was a little bit of that. Indeed, I received a few of those books over the last few years, or columns from the New York Times, and so did Reverend Anya. And there was one book that he gave me that I really wanted to discuss with him and never got a chance. The book Sapiens by Harari. It's an ambitious work, but one I disagree with two of his basic theses, and I really wanted to talk it over with Mike, but I never had that chance. But I guess I get to discuss it with you guys, because I'm sure he gave it to you and told you to read it too, right? Mike was just warm and friendly, loved to meet new people. Like myself, Mike enjoyed the chance encounter, whether it was on the street, at work, or in a pub. A talented conversationalist, he could go on about nearly any subject, from politics and history to sports and overpopulation, of course. He also would freely dispense all manner of medical advice to those looking for it. Although Mike had no vocal training, his family certainly got some, it seems. I'm told that Mike was a natural Irish tenor with a really beautiful voice who would sometimes just break into one of his favorite ballads. Reverend Anya and I will miss the warm thanks and affirmation that Mike regularly sent us about our work here. He was always quick to praise, at least to us, what he loved. And you may find this hard to believe, but that we don't actually get nearly as much praise as you might think from time to time. So I actually have a file in my inbox marked praise. So when somebody sends me a nice note instead of a nasty gram, I put it in there in case I'm thinking people don't like me. I can always read my praise email. True story. And Mike had like 7 of them, and I've only been here for a couple of years. Gregarious, warm-hearted, with the gift of Irish blarney, which I understand means he loves to exaggerate stories and tell them at length, much like people in my family. Michael was a reciter of limericks and a teller of grand tales. He made one and all feel welcome. People gravitated to him like a force of nature. Mike McCann will be sorely missed.
Generosity permeated my father's entire life and his entire being. He gave freely and often of himself, his time, his medical knowledge, his ideas, large and small, and the things in his life that he found beautiful and that made him happy. He loved music, from Mozart and opera to country music, Garrison Keillor, and Irish folk songs, and he would sing often in his beautiful, natural Irish tenor voice. Above all, it was this enormous generosity of spirit that drew people to him and was the reason he was so well loved by so many. Daddy, I would like to give to you the gift of music. It is my honor to sing for you today some of the music that you loved most in the world. And you're hearing that from my family members. These pieces or everything he loved. He selected everything you're hearing today. He loved it all.
Wow. So, thank you so much, Lori. Tom. Khalil Gibran writes in The Prophet, "When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that now gives you joy. And when you're sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight." As we recall our delight and acknowledge our sorrow, we'll now hear from those who knew Mike best. First, we're going to hear from Steve McCann.
My mother used to say, "Mike, you're impossible." She said this often. I didn't really understand what she meant when I was younger. Mom was kind of a stickler for grammar. It didn't really even make sense to me. Impossible. After Mom died in 2008, I sort of morphed into her. I took over her role as manager of all things Mike. I paid his bills, I managed his accounts, I made sure his car was registered, his insurance was paid, all this kind of stuff that he really couldn't be bothered with. I even tried to understand and execute some of the real estate transactions that he concocted. They were always a little bit wow. And there were some uniquely Mike McCann problems as well. There was a time he lost his car in a Boston parking garage for 10 days. Yep, I have details if you want them afterwards. And then there was a time he ran out of gas on his way to Sarasota because he was listening to Science Friday and he just kind of drifted off the interstate. And then he couldn't understand why they didn't come to, he called AAA, he couldn't understand why they didn't show up. And I said, "Dad, take a picture of where you are." And it turns out he was like 200 miles from where he told the AAA guys he was. True story. So I started to understand what Mom meant, impossible. And then these last few months, myself and my siblings trying to help him manage his life with all his contradictions and all his impulsivity, I really started to get it. Dad, you are impossible. And now, with a little time to reflect on his life, I see another side to this impossibility, a side I'm sure that my mother saw as well. He was impossibly generous, impossibly charming, impossibly caring, and impossibly good father. Dad, Mom was right. You are impossible, and I will miss you dearly.
Now we'll hear from Eliana McCann-Smith.
I'm going to share a letter that I wrote to my grandpa that is based on the letters that he wrote to me when I was a baby and I couldn't read or understand them for me to read when I was older. Dear Grandpa, I'm currently sitting on the deck at 95 Summit Avenue in Montclair, New Jersey. It is an almost pleasant 76 degrees and sunny. There's a mother duck and her 4 ducklings living in our backyard, and I'm waiting patiently to catch a glimpse of them when they emerge from their grassy nest. This is the house where I grew up with my family, Mom, Dad, Grandpa, and Acorn, the family Shih Tzu, who was my long-anticipated 9th birthday present. You too were very fond of Acorn, and the two of you grew almost inseparable in old age. During high school, I would often get texts from friends saying that they had had a Grandpa Mike and Acorn sighting in town, or more often, had seen Acorn tied to a pole waiting, not so patiently, to be reunited with you. These same friends all know you, as you were the local grandpa taxi, bringing a whole gaggle of us annoying teens to and from school for years. All of the neighbor kids were so happy to hitch a ride with us and would always come away with a funny story or anecdote that you imparted to them. Everyone loved you, but that is not exclusive to scrawny high schoolers in Montclair, New Jersey. That has been a steady constant your whole life. Your infectious, gregarious ways brought joy and laughter to us all, and boy, do we hear about how everyone loved you so, all of the time. Even the people who only met you once, like a waiter at a restaurant or a colleague or student of Mom's, remembered meeting you and always wanted to know how you were doing. Growing up with you has been a wild ride, from spontaneous jaunts to the diner, to reluctantly helping you with yard work, to just sitting together on the couch talking about life over the din of obnoxious news anchors. I wouldn't give it up for anything. As I got older, I came to know you better and began to understand your complexities and the way you see life. We are all humans, and it is important to remember all of our sides, all of the gray, as nothing is truly black and white, which you definitely taught me with your sometimes delinquent Irish ways. For me, you have been a beacon of light and hope. There has never been a time when I did not feel supported by you, although I'm pretty sure you still secretly want me to become a medical doctor or vet. We'll see about that. You have instilled in your grandchildren the importance of following our bliss and paving our own unique path forward in life. Although you may not have always been aware of how great an impact you had on so many people throughout your many years of life, I hope that some part of you was proud of everything you accomplished and everyone whose lives you have forever changed just by being you. Even though I have moved across the pond for now, far away from 95 Summit Avenue, this place and the time we all shared here will forever be my home. Mom, Dad, Grandpa, and Acorn. More on all this later. The mother duck just came out and I have to go give her some strawberries. Love, your adoring granddaughter, Eliana.
Thank you, Eliana. And now it's our pleasure to hear from Kellen McCann.
So, one of Grandpa's favorite things to say to me and his grandkids was how he was proud of us. And he would say it in typical Mike fashion, which you all know him. Anything that's typical for Mike is generally pretty atypical. He would say that we chose our ancestors well. When an ancestor says this about his descendant, one could reasonably assume that they would be talking about themselves. However, this was not the case. He seemed to forget that I share part of my genome with him, and those qualities he saw in me can be traced right back to him. He sometimes had trouble seeing past the faults he believed he had, and struggled to see the incredible value he brought to the world. For example, he may have seen the negatives in his tendency to dominate a conversation or force decisions on people, but this all came from an almost compulsive-like need to make other people happy. When he dominated conversations or made decisions for others, he was trying to share the joy that he got from those things with other people. He commanded the attention in the room because he had a gift for brightening it simply with his presence. He was so stubborn in his caring and generosity that when we went out to eat, my family, we would have a waiter bring a fake check to him because he always had to be the one taking care of other people and would have it absolutely no other way. With this need to be generous and his incredible intelligence, this didn't last long, and he put an end to our deception pretty quickly. Anyways, he was right. I did choose my ancestors well. And I am just so incredibly proud to think that I share genetic material with someone so skilled at bringing happiness to the lives of all those around him. And I hope that I can live up to those feelings of unconditional pride he had for me.
Stubborn generosity. I like that. Thank you, Kellen. We'll now hear from Joe McCann.
So I had way too much to say, of course. But since Uncle Dave couldn't make it, we got plenty of time, right? No, but really, you could cut me off at the 5-minute limit. And Reverend Scott already covered some of the stuff I wanted to cover anyway. And so, in the spirit of levity that my father wanted for this occasion, he wanted either nothing at all or a grand celebration with tons of music. And we're only getting to a tiny fraction of the list that he gave us. So what I wanted to do is share a few of his favorite things as signature expressions and mantras. We've got a board in the reception room with many of them that you can add to, because I'm sure there'll be others that, and we've got a growing list on the online memorial site on My Keeper. Just a few of his favorite things. Little children and little dogs, hot tubs and Hawaiian shirts. This was my best approximation. Turquoise bolo ties, not my normal attire, and Irish linen flat caps. This will now be one of my normal attires. I've already adopted it, and I never did it ever in my life before. Notes on napkins and napkins as earplugs, ice cubes for orchids, tongue oil for a broken chair, the song of a wren, the beauty of a sunset, the scent of a rose, or the sweet aroma of cow manure. Sending flowers and sending books, paying the dinner bill, picking up the bar tab, taking care of people and taking care of the planet, and my favorite, putting his teeth in any random bar glass. These are a few of the favorite things of my father. And the expressions. You heard Maddie or Ellie mention one, follow your bliss, which he says to all his grandkids. Ain't life grand? Indeed, yours was, my father. And he would say, I'm lucky to be alive. It's the third period and time is running out, showing his urgency for living life to the fullest. Just barely, or perhaps, and all living things must die, which he often said. It's no doubt true, but your memory will certainly live on. But the one mantra that I keep returning to, and the one that I think most clearly defines my father's life, for better or for worse, and I think mostly for better, is this one. Rules were made to be broken. And as kids, we heard this over and over. And most people would consider this irresponsible lesson to teach kids and a dangerous way to live life. Perhaps it is. Speaking out in support of an abortion doctor as an employee of a Catholic hospital in the 70s will get you fired. And uninvited meddling in the private affairs of family and friends, however well-intended, could breed some resentment and tension, or maybe just a little annoyance. But we need the rule breakers, the iconoclasts, to push us out of our comfort zones, to break new ground, to bring us fresh ideas and meaningful experiences. If my father had followed the rules, our neighborhood gang of boys would have missed out on the best den mother in the world. We would have missed many great adventures like the quest to find the Ridgeway ghost or discovering a nest of feral cats in Uncle Ralph's barn and bringing one of those cats home, Johnny Herkert, who became Sam, the beloved family cat of the Herkerts. David, sitting right here, can attest to it, even though Johnny left her in a drawer for a whole weekend once. We would have missed out on all of that. And in his professional life, if my father had been a rule follower, one who thinks within the box, he would not have used his own daughters as guinea pigs for his research experiments. He would not have drank Wesson oil and then drawn his own blood to give to premature babies to fatten them up. And he would not have cultured the gut flora of George Pingle, a student of his who had never had diarrhea or any intestinal upset in his life. And he wouldn't have developed the strain of E. coli bacteria that he used for his reflorestation treatment of people with serious bowel diseases, as Reverend Scott mentioned. And if he were a conformist rule follower, he may have given up after many colleagues protested. Dr. McCann is feeding shit to his patients. And he may have, yes, indeed. He wasn't doing that, by the way. It's an organism in everyone's gut, but there are many strains of E. coli. And this one that Pingle had apparently worked well to replace diseased bowel flora of people suffering from these diseases, and it worked very well to cure people. But he didn't stop providing these and other experimental treatments for various ailments, even after he was no longer affiliated with a university and on his own, sometimes traveling across the country at his own expense to take care of someone, and taking on any and all of the most confounding cases that people, young and old, sought him out to solve when others couldn't. And in his personal life, if he would have respected the typical social norms and boundaries of privacy, we all may have been spared plenty of annoyance and discomfort, but at the cost of weaker social connections and lost friendships. For me, one of the most annoying things my father would do is call a friend or a relative and thrust the phone in your face and say, "Here, talk to so-and-so." You might be in the middle of doing whatever, but no matter. But I have, upon further reflection, come to appreciate this annoyance because, like most of us, I'm not as good as he was in keeping up those connections and keeping in contact with people and reaching out to people. So a quick story, how we could do it on time, to illustrate. It was when my mom and dad and Uncle Rick and Aunt Marlene were on a trip to Ireland that they had been waiting years to do. And my dad somehow convinced the bus tour operator to divert the bus many hours to seek out this tiny town, Killa, in the County Cork, and the Old Thatch Tavern and Inn. And so I was in New York, and I get this random call from Ireland, and sure enough, it's my father who had thrust the phone into old man Sweeney's face, a man he had never met before, and to me, 3,000 miles away. So after a few awkward moments, both of us appreciated being reconnected after many, many years and getting a chance to reminisce on the time a 20-year-old stranded hitchhiker was taken in by a wonderful Irish family who showed him the finer points of life in County Cork, including the best poutine and championship camogie matches that his daughter was playing in. So we all have our own distinct stories of how Grandpa, Dad, Doc McCann kept us connected or has taken care of us or enriched our lives somehow, often in unconventional ways, and we're all better for it, in my view. So yes, dear old Dad, I agree with you. Rules were made to be broken.
You know, I never pegged Mike as a hockey fan. I mean, we never talk sports. So I love that. It's late in the third period, and we better hurry up. Our game's almost over. And just a note on the hats. For those of you who didn't hear our conversation earlier, you know, some folks think that for some reason it's not proper to wear a hat in a house of worship, but that's a very specific cultural norm. You know, if you think of, Jews and Muslims, you can't enter their houses of worship without having your head covered. So wear your caps. We have another prepared testimonial, and this is from Linda.
I struggled with what to say about my dad today, and you've heard so many amazing stories about him already, so this is going to be short. How do you condense an amazing and remarkable life into an hour, a few minutes, or an hour ceremony? So I decided to just share a few things about my dad that you may, some of them you've heard already today actually, but you may not know about him. So he's descended of an illegal immigrant, which means most of us also are. He attempted to run for the Senate. He developed cures for Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, which you heard about, but also C. diff and eczema and others. As a doctor, he had the top patient ratings at Kaiser Permanente, twice what all the other doctors had. He marched on Washington to protest overpopulation. He went to hear Martin Luther King speak. He went snorkeling for the first time in his life when he was 82 years old. He was not afraid to try anything. He fed peanut butter to our dog, Pokey, just to see him smack his lips while he was trying to eat it. He loved jacuzzis. He loved sitting in the jacuzzi. He had 5 different kinds of cancer, and he survived them all. But I think we will all agree, I think, that if we could pick one word that describes my father, it would be very difficult. It would be impossible. That would be one of the words, like Steve said. He was nothing if not a really colorful character. So many words come to mind, right? Stubborn, funny, brilliant, curious, unique, loving, passionate, crazy. But I think we'd all agree on generous. He was generous to a fault. My dad was a giver. It defined his life. It's who he was. He gave new life to his patients. He gave advice to anyone who asked, and many who didn't. He sang and recited limericks to his bar buddies, his family, and friends. He spoiled every animal he encountered, and many humans too. But most of all, he wrapped us all in his love. Some believe that when you die, you ascend to heaven and become part of the cosmos, part of the stars. I like to think that my dad is up there, wrapped around the earth, wrapping his arms around all of us, even now.
So that concludes our prepared remarks. I encourage you to keep telling one another stories. You know, the stories are what keep the memory alive. And, you know, I'm a strong believer that there's something magical that happens between us when we share the stories of the folks we love, brings them back in our presence somehow, mystically. And then, as that is concluded, let us have a musical response. In fact, two of them.
So my father fell in love with this in 1978, the first time he ever heard it. And he's been singing it, or parts of it, ever since. And it's from Don Giovanni.
La cinarella mano, la mi dirai di sì, vedi non è lontano, partiamo mio da qui.
Vorrei e non vorrei, mi trema un poco il cor, felice sarei, ma può bullarmi ancor, ma può bullarmi ancor.
Vieni mio bel diletto,
Mi fa pietà, nasetto,
io cambierò tua sorte.
presto non son più forte, non son più forte, non son più forte.
Vieni, vieni, la cinarella mano,
Vorrei e non vorrei,
la mi dirai di sì.
mi trema un poco il cor.
Partiamo io da qui.
Può bullarmi ancor.
Vieni mio benedetto, io cambierò tua sorte.
Son più forte, non son più forte, non son più forte.
Andiamo, andiamo. Andiamo, andiamo mio bene, a ristorare le pene dell'innocente amor. Andiamo, andiamo mio bene, a ristorare le pene dell'innocente amor. Andiamo, andiamo mio bene, andiamo, nel bene a ristorare dell'innocente amor.
Wow, thank you for that. He did sing that all the time. I met Mike in 2008. And from the moment I walked in that door at the new house on Summit Avenue and saw him hanging the curtains in the window, I fell in love with him. And he would say to me, Lionel, you know, Lionel, you bring us so much joy, and you're part of the family. And that's what he did for so many people. He made us feel like we were so loved and so part of the family. And then he would always say, now when are you going to bless us with a little one running around here? Because you know you're getting up there, so you don't have much time. So the day came, and when he found out I was pregnant, and he immediately appointed himself as godfather of my son Julian, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but he is watching, hopefully from Germany. And I'm just so honored that I got to share in this last chapter of Mike's life, and that my son had the privilege of having him as his godfather for 6 years of his life. And I heard him just a few weeks ago actually say to a friend of my parents in Minnesota, you know, I have another grandpa, and his name is Grandpa Mike. And I said, you know what, you've got that right, Julian, because he is alive in you, and his light shines through you, and it shines through me, and it shines through all of us, and that is a light that can't be put out. So I'm just so thankful that we can be here today to celebrate that light and celebrate him. And the song's for you, Mike. Thank you that you are with us in our hearts. We sang this many times together and probably got kicked out of a few restaurants because of it, but I love you, Grandpa Mike.
Cathedral bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of Paris, or the April dawn? Who knows if we will meet again? But when the morning chimes ring sweet again, I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I
The first half of our program is about to end. That was a joke. Wow. Just taking a moment to take it all in. The stories and the feelings and the beautiful sounds. Just amazing. Thank you. Thank you for making me part of this. I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer and love. The Greek poet Homer writes in the Iliad, "Like the forest leaves in their generations, such is humankind. For the wind casts the leaves from their branches earthward, yet again others the budding greenwood each springtime brings to birth. And so does humanity's generation spring up and fade from the earth." Beloved ones, here in our gathering is a deepening of meaning, a sharing of souls, a mingling of love and emotion, an opportunity to reflect and meditate on the importance of loving relationships as we celebrate a life that was cherished. Inspired by Mike's example, may we spring up and bring to birth a resolve to live a life full of loving intention, of rascally jokes, of scientific seeking, of yearning for meaningful experiences with loved ones or with a stranger on a chance encounter. And as we recall Mike's passing, we remember that our grieving offers life to our memories. Our love leads to dedication and to comfort, a going forward to the triumph of the soul's healing, the conquering of the wilderness of despair. Through our love and memory will come a deepening inward knowledge, a peaceful knowing that in the final reckoning, the God of our understanding assures us that all can be well. And so we honor the life of Mike McCann, that innovator, rebel, generous, curious spirit, cherished by all whose lives he touched. A man who brought curiosity to all he did, whose wanderlust always kept him looking for the next place, a special someone whose example will live in our memories for ages to come. In the name of all that each of us deems holy, we pray. Amen. We will now conclude with Praisier d'amour, or the joys of love. And it is, I think, the whole cast and crew for this one, I believe, coming on stage.
No, I give the book. I'll give it. This is another tradition. I don't know if our Aunt Anne knew that it was going to be such a tradition in our family when she and her husband, David, so Anne is, for those of you who don't know, our father's sister, and they had this song at their wedding, 1968, is that right? 69, and it's been in our family ever since. And so, and we, everyone will sing it with us, hopefully. 4 times, French, and then the first and second verses in English, and back to the first again. So, we'll do the French. Okay, ready?
We will conclude with this old Irish blessing, a favorite of Mike's. If you know it, feel free to say it along with me. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. I invite you now to join us in Fletcher Hall, which is through this door, for a reception that is provided by the family. And I will come about and excuse each of the rows, beginning with the family in the first few rows. As we hear this next audio file with the two flutes, Les Voix Humaines.